So how's it going, Craig?
Well, wonderful. Thanks. Yeah, things are good.
I have a question for you. Um, and I'm sure a zillion other people have this question. And when it comes to the non-dual teachings, um, and then self-help stuff and what we feel inside, I'm completely confused about this. So it's about finding my purpose in this life. Okay, and I have never felt that I've known what my purpose is here. And then at times I've heard that, searching for your purpose is useless. Whatever I'm doing right here, right now is my purpose. You go, oh, okay, that makes sense. But there still feels like something's missing. It's empty. Like, okay, I'm washing the dishes. That's my purpose right now. Cool. But it still doesn't seem to satisfy that I'm doing what I'm like in general, what I'm, on the right path.
Yes.
So that's my question for you today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. It's a question I get all the time. Um, my big response is, well, what's in your heart? Life purpose is an answer that arises out of our heart. Yeah, like as a kid, I just had this vision of me just being a priest, a monk. I kind of grew up in that with a Catholic spirituality. So my vision was to be a priest or a monk, and I've just known that just for throughout my whole life. And I was never fully happy until I was able, to fully be teaching and sharing and be busy teaching. And so, yeah, I stumbled around with this purpose thing for a long time. Now, I did have 20 years of working for my teacher, and I knew that, at the time, that's what I was supposed to be doing. Like, that was crystal clear. Like, this was training. It was very clearly an apprenticeship. Like, that was just crystal clear. But there was always just like this kind of silent ache in my heart, even when I was with my teacher, that, I want to be sharing in this way. And, that ache, that thing, it just never settled down until I, fully was. The same thing if someone's like a singer, they know in their heart they're meant to sing. So the real question that I would leave you or anyone else with this question to sit with is, what's in your heart? What's in your heart? Now, when most people go and they look in their heart, the first thing they tend to encounter is their wound. And for a lot of us who've been beat up by life, the wound is something like, oh, I've gotten my ass kicked by life, therefore God doesn't love me, there is no God, or there's no place for me in this world. And when you just kind of bump up against that wall, most people, it's just like a painful, it's painful to admit that. And there's no faith, or there's a loss of faith, or there's just like, oh, this is how things are in the human world. There's no real place for me. I'm a victim of life. It's me against the world. I have to fight for my survival. And we kind of go into that whole song and dance, which is, the story of ego. And so then we struggle. And so the invitation is to admit, okay, I've been beat up by life. But does that mean there is no God? Does that mean God does not have a place for me in this world? Does that mean I live in a meaningless universe? Or is it possible? Is there a new possibility? Since Darwin came along, there became this realization of this thing called evolution, that we live in an evolutionary world. And within the context of an evolutionary world, we're going to grow through pain, we're going to grow through suffering, we're going to grow through challenge. And so, for me, like when I was 8 years old and wanted to become a priest or whatever, I can't just become a priest at 8. I have to grow up. I have to get trained in spirituality. I have to face all my fears about being a teacher, because as a kid, I grew up in a house where I was kind of told, like basically like shut up, like shut the hell up, be quiet, don't make any noise. My dad was kind of like a drill sergeant. And so I closed my throat chakra. I couldn't speak. I never spoke my truth. And so I had to do all this work. I had to face my shadow. I had to face my wound. My shadow being I wanted to speak, but I was afraid to speak. I had a wound that said there was no place for me here on planet Earth. Nobody loves me. I don't belong here. I need to be back in heaven where, other spiritual people belong. You know what I mean? And so I had to come into my heart and believe, yes, there's a dream here. I'm going to listen to that dream. But I also had to develop the backbone that said, despite the pain, despite my fear of rejection, despite me like showing up to teach like my first meditation class and there being, only 2 people there. And then the next week, 1 person came. And then the next week, no one came. And see, God, God forces us to look at that and say, are you going to give up on your dream? Or are you willing to do your work? And for me, it was, could I face the fear of rejection? Could I face that? Can I face the fear of rejection and not believe the fear, believe in it? Like, okay, it didn't work out. Time to go be an accountant. Time to go be an accountant. It's funny, my parents, they had a business that sold paper, like literally, like the TV show The Office. So I could always, just, jump ship and just run back home and got a job. It's really safe working at the office. But I had to believe, and believing in myself was painful. I had many years where I had no money, where people, said, I like what you have to offer, Craig, but I'm going to go to yoga instead. I'm going to go over here instead. I'm going to go to the Dharma Center instead. But I had to stay with myself. I had to continue to listen to that voice inside. And I continued to walk in that direction. And so most people, they don't even know how to listen to their heart. So listening to your heart means listening to the quietest voice within you. If you want to know what your purpose is, your purpose, it's that quietest voice, that truth, which you've known all along. And if you don't know what that truth is, I'll give you some hints. You have to look at if God gave you a gift. Your purpose and your gift tend to be aligned almost always. Almost always. And so like one of my gifts is being able, being able to sit with people in pain, being able to listen, being able to intuitively feel into another, being able to, to speak and have a confidence about what I'm speaking about, through direct experience, through knowing it from my life. And so we have to look at these things. Okay, well, if these are our gifts, then chances are our purpose is going to be in alignment with our gifts. Like my friend Rick Archer, he's not a spiritual teacher. He says it to me all the time. Rick Archer from Buddha at the Gas Pump. But what he is he has the gift of networking. He knows how to connect people, and he does. That's his gift, and that's what he does in the world. So he's living in alignment with his purpose. So he feels like he's just in this divine flow, not a flow like me where I'm a teacher, the idea comes through me, it comes out my mouth. Him, the ideas come through him, and then he connects to people or groups of people. And so he has that gift. Some people who, have a talent for music, they just know it in their heart. And so that's their purpose, to share their gift. When God gives you a gift, there is an expectation that you share this gift in the world. And if you don't share it, you will feel depressed. Or if you don't share it appropriately, like me, for example, part of my journey was I was a high school teacher for like just a couple of years. When I was like 20 years old, I had 2 jobs. I worked for my spiritual teacher, David. And then at night, I taught night school for high school kids, like kids who were at-risk high school students. And I felt it was true that I am a teacher. Like that was clear. But it wasn't true that I was going to be Mr. High School teacher. The kids used to call me Brother Craig, and just harass the hell out of me. That wasn't my highest truth, to be there for the rest of my life and have high school boys harassing me every hour on the hour. Hey, Craig, are you high? Like that's not my truth. I was good at it. I could do it. I could, the kids they loved me, even, they drove me crazy, but they loved me. And so like I was doing my gift, kind of, sort of. But what I found is in my classes, funny people would ask me, they'd say, Craig, what do you teach? And I say, well, I teach about God in the public schools all day, every day. I'd have them read, the life of Dalai Lama. I talked to them about Jesus. I talked to them about all these great saints and this and that. And they said, how can you do that? I said, well, this is who I am. This is what I do. And, we have to read books. So here's the books we're reading. No one complained. The kids loved it. I loved that aspect of it. But like when it came time for me to show up to teacher meetings, no, I wasn't going to go to the teacher meetings because my heart wasn't in it. They made me feel depressed. And so I knew that wasn't where I was ultimately meant to be. That was just a step along the journey. So many people are sharing their gift in the world, but their gift it's not being shared in the highest way possible. It's not being shared in alignment with their love, their passion. And so sometimes, we have a gift of, like I was saying with my friend Rick, with networking, we work as a networker, but we're not networking the right groups. So it's not totally fulfilling. And so we have to bring it fully into our highest manifest reality. Yeah, and so I hope that was helpful and that answered the question.
That is helpful. As a kid, I never had a vision of my purpose. So I didn't start off like you did, where you just knew at a young age. Yeah. And even though a wound was created and you had to work through that, for me, it just seems like there was just wound. And so you're right. When I look into my heart, what I first encounter is my wound, and it covers up that any quiet knowing. If I practically look out at my life, I can see some of my gift. It's not music, it's not singing, it's not teaching in that sense. But it's something I wouldn't, until we were just talking now, I wouldn't have really considered that possibly being my purpose, but now I have something to inquire into and feel into that.
Yeah, and a great question. So is were you able to identify your gift?
Yeah, part of it. It would be getting things done, helping with websites and ideas and planning and project management and things.
And how do you feel when you're connected fully, with the website management or the project management? How do you feel in your heart?
It feels good and in service if it's for the right client.
And see that's the kicker there. You feel good and you feel like I'm doing this service to the world if it's with the right client. And so sometimes our life, becomes, can I get the right clients? Can I steer myself in that direction? Can I put myself, in those right circles with the right kind of groups that I love and support and that are in alignment with my highest truth? And sometimes that requires a sacrifice. Sometimes it requires a sacrifice. The funny thing is that, say, when I was talking about myself with being a high school teacher, well, high school teachers normally don't make very much money. But you know who makes less than a high school teacher? A spiritual teacher. Spiritual teachers make very little money, especially when they're beginning, and because you don't get a salary, just you basically work for donation. And so I had to do all this thing where I worked a second job, and to build up, my spiritual teaching, my teaching community. That took great sacrifice. There's many times I thought, oh, maybe I'll just go back to being a high school teacher. At least I'll have a salary. And so in a sense, God was challenging me. He said, do you really believe, Craig? Are you willing to let go of that little bit of money you did have, and that security, and try this other thing? And I said, yes. And God said, well, are you willing to work a second job? I said, yes. Because I want to be teaching, the right people, the right students, the right groups. I said it the same with my counseling profession. I had an opportunity to work in mental health centers and have a salary. But I thought, geez, I'm not going to work, in those administrative environments where I see an individual for 30 or 40 minutes and then do 45 minutes of paperwork for them, and then they never come back again. I'm not going to play that game. I'm not going to be in that, state-run and agency work. That's just like a disaster world. I want to work with healthy clients who are adult, who are mature, who are having real spiritual awakenings. And so it was painful, to limit myself in that way. But eventually it panned out. But it took some time, for me to kind of steer myself to build up enough clients and students to be able to just do this as a job. And so oftentimes, God gives us this gift and then she gives us a challenge. And so you say, okay, I feel connected when I'm doing this type of work with the right clients. And then so can you start gearing yourself more toward that work? Whereas if we're just, if we have the gift of accounting and we're just crunching numbers all day for, for Ford Motor Company, and we hate cars and the disaster effects that it has on the environment, we might say, I'm doing my gift, but I'm not happy. It doesn't feel true in my heart. It feels truer when I'm working with a local nonprofit, when I'm working with groups that are planting trees, or when I'm working with local farmers. And then do we have the faith to walk in that direction?
Yeah, I can see that also dealing with the initial wound is another topic for another day, for those that that feel like they have no access to anything but the pain. when they look in. Um, I would imagine some people are completely unaware of any gift, and I know I've been there.
And so with your gift, a great question is just like, what am I good at? Like, what am I naturally good at? And you can't just have a big fat egoic mind that says nothing. I'm not good at nothing. You have to be willing to be like quiet and honest, contemplate, and just really look at yourself, like really look inward and say, like, what am I good at? What am I good at? Like, I know as a teacher, I'm not so good at philosophy. I'm not good at dogma. I'm not good at, having these really precise spiritual discourses. But what I am good at is opening to God's grace, letting that grace flow through me, and somehow it just touches people. And so that's something that I felt as a kid. I just used to open to God, but then I had to do the work to develop it more. So to develop the gift, spent many years with my teacher, with him training me, just following that thread, a transmission. I said, okay. And then finally he said, okay, you're doing good. You're doing good at this, Craig.
And the practices learned through your teacher to develop this connection with God and the stillness within where it speaks. How about share some examples of those practices?
Well, it's very much, what I was saying in the beginning. Can you be quiet? Can you drop into your heart? Can you feel the flow of goodness in your heart? Can you feel the childlike innocence? Like, if you want to connect with God, what did Jesus say? Something about being, humble like a child. Being humble. So you can't be in your head like thinking. If you're up in your head thinking, that puts a wall between you and God. Or if you're feeling in your emotional world, well, you'll just feel yourself into confusion and pain. But it's connecting with that childlike innocence in your chest, the childlike innocence in the center of your being, and just opening that, feeling that gentleness. And then just, in the most, humble way, it's just like looking up to God and just inviting her presence, inviting life into you, the intelligence and love of life, letting it into you, let it speak to you. And she's speaking to us in every moment. Every moment. Most people, they're too busy in their head, they're too identified with their thoughts, or they're too lost in their emotions. And so it takes the humility to let go of thinking that my thoughts are so important that I need to listen to them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a mouthful the way I said that, but just like that's humility. I'm just going to drop out of my head. What I'm thinking is not so important. What all these emotions are, they're not so important. There's something deeper within me. If I just take a deep breath and just feel into that childlike innocence. And as you can imagine, just being like a little girl on a mountain day, mountain spring day, just like running the fields, then laying down in the grass and just like opening your heart, you just feel this quiet radiance. So when you open to your radiance, your gentleness, and then just kind of just like gently turn your body upward, you'll begin to feel there's this greater radiance that wants to pour into you. And it will talk to you, it will lead you, it will show you the way. It will open doors for you. And so that's the other thing, is sometimes for people with life purpose, we walk around and we're trying to figure it out in our head, and we're doing, my dad was a doctor, so I'm supposed to be a doctor. My dad, for me, it was my dad was a soldier, so I'm supposed to be a soldier. And I grew up in this military family, but I just knew Like every time I walked in that damn recruiter's office, I knew, I was like, oh, this just is not the right place. I just couldn't sign that damn form. It was not the right place for me.
Right.
And so I had to have this willingness not to listen to my conditioning, because my conditioning was very clear. Craig, you grew up in a military family. You like guns and tanks. On vacations, we go to military bases. That's what we all do. Your older brother's in the Army. He's cool. You love your older brother. You're going to be just like him. But I had to say, no, that's not my truth. I had to listen to something deeper and say yes to that which is deeper. Yes to that which is deeper. But what a lot of people do is they listen to their conditioning, they go out into the world, and then they just start banging their head against the wall, and they're trying like, it just doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel right, nothing feels right. And then they try to think themselves into, okay, I'll go back to school, I'll do this, I'll do that, and they come up with their 5-year plan or whatever, that people do. And again, like that's fine, that's wise to do that, to have the 5-year plan. But if you really want to save yourself some heartache, can you stop, let go of all the thinking, just come into your heart and say, what's in my heart? I can't tell you how many, I hate to say this out loud, but how many careers I've destroyed. I've had individuals come to me and they're in their last year of med school. And they tell me just clearly from their heart, I don't want to be a doctor. And I said, why the hell are you doing this? You're 20-something years old. You don't want to be a doctor. You don't have to. Well, my dad was a doctor. And my grandpa was too. And they really want me to be a doctor. I'm like, well, great. Do you want to be miserable the rest of your life? And I'm like, you might make some good money. So it might serve you to finish med school. If you're in that last semester or year, just like, maybe just finish that.
Right.
Just, polish it off. But you need to listen to your heart. But normally when someone comes into contact with me and we admit it openly and honestly, like what I'm doing is not what I want to do, then that whole story is a sinking ship. But it's very efficient, though, to do this. When you're young, it's very efficient to do it. In any moment of your life, just ask your heart first, what's true for me now? And I don't mean your emotional heart, because sometimes our emotional heart's like, I don't want to work. I don't want to do anything. I want to be on eternal vacation. Not that heart. Not that heart. Your true heart. Where it's just like, you feel into it and it's just like, boom. Okay, I know what it is. And it won't always be easy. People have this idea about spirituality. If I listen to my heart, it's going to be, I'll be riding a unicorn across a rainbow into the sunset or something silly. It's not like that. We live in an evolutionary world, and so we have to be prepared to do our hard work. It's like you look at Jesus. God gave him a hard job. It's like, hey, here's your work. And he looked at it, it's like, oh shit, this looks pretty hard.
Definitely.
God said, this is the way forward. This is the way forward. And he had to be strong. He had to learn strength. He got his ass kicked and he kept getting up. He kept standing up and walking forward. So I'm not a guy who paints spiritual illusions that, if you want to be a singer, just go on American Idol or whatever people do, to get famous. And it's not about being famous. It's about you listening to your truth and living your truth. But what you'll find is when you live your truth, God tends to support us. But God doesn't always support us right out of the gates. Because I've sat in classes before where I was a teacher, no one showed up. I was sitting there being flooded with God's grace. And there's no one there and no money in the pot, And I'm looking at God saying, what the hell? You're flooding me with grace? There's no students in the room. There's no money in the bank. What's the deal here? I say, God, do you want me to keep teaching? And he said, teach. I said, okay, I'll come back next week. Come back next week, and then 15 people show up. I'm like, okay, God, you're just kind of testing me. You're helping me develop a backbone here. He did that for many years. 20 people would show up. Next week, no one would show up. 25 people would show up. Next week, one person would show up. Be like, all right, this is fun. This is humiliating. And see, God invites us. Like, if we want to develop this strength in this world, we want to be strong. He's going to challenge us in every way so that our gift can be shared in a powerful, authentic, and confident way. Not egoic confidence,
Right.
but a confidence that develops through us knowing who we truly are in the depth of our being. In the depth of our being.
That's very helpful. And I will admit that it's been, throughout my life, it's been much easier to discern when something has come up that is not right. That it's been much easier to be aware of, no, this path isn't for me, or this client isn't for me, than to know this is my purpose. Something is my purpose. It just was fuzzy. And being
So you'll know it's your purpose because your heart will be lit up. You'll feel radiant inside, and you won't be questioning.
right.
There won't be any question there. There'll just be this sense of like, I'm happy to go to work. Like, people ask me all the time, like, Craig, how can you sit with people in suffering all day long? I never think about it. I just get up in the morning and I go to work. There's just this movement in me. And when I sit with individuals, I feel their heart. I feel their love. I feel God's presence. And it just feels right. It feels true. I never question it. Is it hard? Sure. By Friday, at 4:00, am I done? Yeah, I'm done. I've had a good work week and I'm ready to go home and have a nice weekend.
Right.
So I'm not saying it's a walk in the park.
No.
But your heart can be lit up in situations that are difficult and demanding.
Right.
But there's just a sense, like my older brother, he's a soldier. He knows it. I've told him so many times, get out of the army. Come home. Be safe. Quit going back to Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever the hell it is he's going to. But there's just a sense within him. I'm a soldier. I go to work. I do work. This is what I do. He does not question it. And so a lot of the quality of purpose here, when you're living your purpose, there's no question. When you're a little bit out of alignment, you're going to have a little bit of questions about is this the right client, or is this the right situation? Is there another way? But if you're doing absolutely the wrong job, like if I was a tax accountant, I should feel like putting a bullet in my head, literally, because it's totally opposite of my nature. And just like if you were a tax accountant and that if that was your nature, literally, and you were forced to be a spiritual teacher, you should feel highly uncomfortable. You should feel like, oh, this is not the right thing for me. I don't want to be doing this. It should feel off. The fact that your heart feels off when you're doing something that's not true, that shows your heart is not working. It shows your heart is working fully. It's communicating to you clearly, I'm not doing the right thing. And so this whole idea that a lot of spiritual people have, especially in the non-dual world, you should just accept what is. That's bullshit. You do not accept what is when it comes to relationships, life purpose, things that are big, big deals in your life, like your job. You shouldn't just accept it if you hate it. You should be quiet, listen to your heart, and walk in the direction that your heart is telling you. If not, your heart will respond to you with, oh, you're not listening to me? I'll give you anxiety or depression. Because that's what a heart does. If you don't listen to it, it will literally manifest anxiety or depression. Now, accepting what is, I had to go visit a student in London, a couple weeks ago. I had to be on a 9-hour airplane ride. I have to accept what is on that 9 hours. Okay, I'm sitting here. I'm going to try to go to sleep. It's the middle of the night. I can't go to sleep. The lady keeps bumping me. I'm going to accept what is. The lady's bumping me. I can't fall asleep. I'm not going to fight it. I'm just going to sit there, do my best to meditate, open my heart, be in the present moment, not try to be somewhere else. I'm going to accept what is on that airplane ride. But if someone told me you have to be an accountant because your dad was an accountant, accept what is, no, that is not the truth. That's a recipe for chronic anxiety or chronic depression. I hope that made sense.
Yep, that was very helpful, Craig, and I'm quite sure we'll be picking this up again at some point in a future talk. But for now, we'll wrap it up, and I really appreciate you answering that for me today.
Yeah. It's a beautiful question, and it's something, this is one of the great questions of the spiritual path is, God made me. Like, who am I? And how am I supposed to live in this world?
Yeah.
Is there a gift here? If there's a gift here, I'm supposed to share it. How can I share this gift?
Right.
How can I share this love in the world? It's one way that this world will change. It's through all of us waking up to our gift and sharing our beauty and our divinity in this world. Yeah, so thank you. A beautiful question.
Thank you very much, Craig.
Yeah, of course.